Welcome to the chapter 7 of ICSE Environmental Science series, and the chapter's name is Energy. This is the syllabus that has been prescribed by the board. So the first part is about the different renewable and non-renewable energy resources, what it means, and how fossil fuels are dwindling. Then we'll next see what is the meaning of nuclear energy, both fission and fusion, and we'll also talk about one of the biggest disasters related to nuclear energy, which is the Chernobyl disaster. And finally, we'll look at how we can have a sustainable energy future by both energy conservation as well as studying about a few of the alternative energy sources. Though this part is not to be tested in your syllabus, we need to know what is the meaning of renewable and non-renewable energy source, because only then can we get on with the rest of the chapter. So renewable is where the energy source can be replenished naturally, or in other words, it can be replenished or regenerated over a short period of time. So energy sources such as the wind or the water or solar energy, even if we tend to use them more, it can get replenished very quickly in comparison, or when we compare with a non-renewable energy resource which is available only in limited quantity, and not only that, it takes a very long time to be regenerated, or it can't be regenerated at all, you can say. So such energy sources are, examples are the fossil fuels like coal, oil, natural gas, and these are already getting over, their supplies are already dwindling. We In this scenario, we need to look out for renewable energy resources for all our energy needs, whether it is to run the house, whether it is to run an appliance inside our house, in the factory, in our workplace, or whether it is even to run an automobile. We have to come up with sustainable renewable energy resources, those which we can use for a long time. We have to come up with those energy resources. So the whole chapter is about the different types of renewable energy resources and how we can use them. That is what the board wants to focus on, rather than on the dwindling supply of fossil fuels. So the first energy source we'll talk about is the nuclear energy. Now, the moment I say nuclear energy, it means we are using nuclear reactions as an energy source. And what does nuclear reactions mean? Reactions which are happening within the nucleus of an atom, or they involve the nucleus of an atom. Those are called as the nuclear reactions. So nuclear reactions and energy from the nuclear reactions can be of two types. We can either have nuclear fission, or we could have nuclear fusion. So we'll see each one of these in detail. Now, nuclear fission is a reaction where we are splitting an atom. Usually it's an atom of a radioactive element like uranium. So we take the atom, and the atom is split open, or you are breaking up the atom, and because of the breaking up of that atom, there is so much heat that is being generated, which is then used to produce steam, and that steam runs turbines which drive a generator, and finally we get electricity. So that's how the nuclear fission works. What are we doing here? We're taking an atom and we are splitting that atom to generate energy. That's why it's called as nuclear fission. This has its own advantages and disadvantages. Though nuclear fission is being used around the world in some power reactors, it has its own plus and minuses. Let's see what are those. So the advantages of nuclear energy from nuclear fission, I'm specifically talking about because it is being used. The first one is that it helps you to conserve the fossil fuel. So I already told you fossil fuels are dwindling. We are not having enough fossil fuels in nature. So if we use nuclear energy, we are able to save on the fossil fuels. Not only that, the amount of energy that's released from a nuclear reaction is huge. It releases a very high amount of energy, which is much, much more in comparison to a fossil fuel. When you burn a fossil fuel, it helps us to generate electricity continuously. So you are able to produce electricity on a continuous basis, and if you see, the carbon footprint is very, very small. So it's you don't generate any greenhouse gases, and on the whole you are trying to help to protect the environment. But it has its own disadvantages, or negatives. The first one is that the uranium atoms or any other radioactive element that you are using is so risky to handle that the accident can happen if there is negligence. So any kind of negligence, either during the handling or during transport or during the storage of that element or during the functioning, any small negligence can result in very big disasters, and it has happened. We have seen in history there have been a few disasters with which are connected with a nuclear power plant. So the negligence can lead to a very high risk of accident. The second part is that the waste that is generated after the energy has been produced, the waste that is generated, the nuclear waste, is radioactive in nature. So its disposal is a big challenge. And because it is radioactive, it can pose another set of health hazards. So when we are disposing of that waste, we have to be really careful. Otherwise, it can again lead to another form of pollution. And the initial cost is very, very high for not only for nuclear energy, for any kind of renewable energy source. We'll see that the general disadvantage is that the initial cost of setting it up is high, but then later we do get electricity in good quantities. So these are some of the advantages and disadvantages of the nuclear energy by nuclear fission, because that is what is being used across the world. We do have nuclear fusion as well. Now nuclear fusion is where you're fusing something. So you are taking two lighter nuclei and then you are fusing them, you are combining them together in a reactor, and then you that produces another heavier nucleus, and during the process a very high amount of energy is being released, which is then being used to again run turbines and generate electricity. So in theory, nuclear fusion releases much more energy than nuclear fission, but the problem is that the electricity generation from nuclear fusion is still in experimental stages. It's because though the advantage is that it doesn't release any kind of harmful substances, there are no toxic gases, no greenhouse gases, no radioactive waste. The problem is that for this fusion to occur, for you to combine small atoms and get a big atom, a heavier atom, for this fusion to occur, we need a really high temperature, very, very high temperature, 100 to 300 million degrees Celsius, which is very difficult for us to maintain in a reactor. It is very risky and very difficult on a large scale. So this reaction, though it produces a large amount of energy, we have not been able to replicate it in a stable form on earth. This is happening continuously in the sun's core. That is how we are getting so much energy from the sun, but we have yet been unable to replicate it. There have been some positive experiments which have been done, which are showing a lot of promising results, but we have not yet started using it on a commercial scale. That's nuclear fusion. Now there are a lot of safety concerns that are associated with nuclear energy. They arise especially with nuclear fission because they arise due to the potential hazards of accidents that can happen. Like I said, it's a radioactive material, so there is the exposure to radiation is a big problem, because that can, it doesn't just cause somatic defects, it doesn't just change your skin type, or it doesn't burn your skin. It's not just that, it can even cause genetic variations. It can go inside your cell and cause changes in the DNA of a person. So exposure to radiation is a big problem, and if you don't handle it properly, it can lead to accidents. One such accident is what I have shown over here, which is mentioned specifically in your syllabus. That is the Chernobyl disaster. Now the Chernobyl disaster happened in the month of April in 1986 in Ukraine. Now what happened over here is that there was a flawed reactor. The design of the reactor was flawed, and along with that, they say that the people who were employed were not trained properly. They were inadequately trained, because of which there was a huge explosion and fire, and the radioactive particles were sprayed into the atmosphere. In fact, it was not just in that area. It through the atmosphere, it was carried to different parts of the western USSR as well as Europe. And it not only affected that generation, it affected many more generations to come. There were long term effects like cancers in the children, deformities in the babies who are being born. The food, the meat, the animals were also contaminated. So for a very long period of time, in fact the cleanup is not yet done. It happened in 1986. We have still not been able to clean up that area completely of the radioactive material. So this is what I was saying. The even a small negligence can cause a huge risk of accident in the power plant. And but of course that is declining over the years, because we are coming up with better reactor designs, we are coming up with better safety protocols. The risk of accidents is coming down, but definitely it is there. Now, the next part of your topic, the last part of your chapter, is about sustainable energy future. So we need to see how we can have continuous supply of energy in a sustainable manner. Now, sustainable or sustainability is really the buzzword. We have been talking about sustainability over so many different chapters. Sustainability is when you are able to meet your needs, at the same time you don't hamper the needs of the future generations. So what it means here is, I need energy for the current population. At the same time, I can't use up everything, finish up everything in such a way that the future generations don't have any energy sources. So that shouldn't happen. That's what we call as a sustainable energy future. And for that, we have to have, there are only two ways. Either, I mean, it's not either or, you need to do both. One is we have to go for energy conservation. That is, the decision or the practice of using lesser energy, using energy consciously. For a simple example, turning off the light when you're not using it or when you're not in the room, unplugging the appliances. All those are simple ways in which we can conserve energy. Switching off the car when you're at a signal. So in one way or the other, we need to conserve energy. That's the first thing that we need to do. The second thing is we have to look at the alternate sources of energy, the other renewable sources. Move away from fossil fuels and the usual natural gas, coal. Move away from those sources and try to look at other sources which can meet our daily needs and at the same time help us to have a sustainable energy for the future generations as well. So we'll now look at a few examples of alternate sources of energy. The first one is using solar energy, which is where we use the sun's energy and convert it into electricity. So it can be used to run devices like water heaters, solar cookers, or even for street lights, solar energy has been used. Now, all of the energy sources that I'm going to talk about are all renewable in nature, and usually the installation cost is quite high. But then with solar energy, it's a clean source. It doesn't release any kind of greenhouse gases. It's very good for the environment. It helps us to conserve the fossil fuels. So if you use more of solar energy, you can save on the fossil fuels. And the main problem is that solar power generation, that panel needs a lot of space, and it works only when the sun is shining. But for this we have, in India there has been a very good solution that we have come up with. In the state of Gujarat, they have installed panels over canals. So below the canal, water will keep the panels cool, and at the same time you have so much of space that is available. So this is one way in which we can save on space and at the same time generate solar energy. The second one is hydropower, which is energy from the water, from the flow of water. Now, this not only is a clean source, and it is a renewable energy. It helps us to conserve the fossil fuels. But apart from that, it has a lot of additional benefits, because when you have a reservoir like this for generation of the hydropower, that reservoir can also be used for irrigation support. It can be used for supplying drinking water. Not just that, the building of a dam and this kind of a structure does help in controlling floods as well. So hydropower is again something that is being used in our country very commonly. A type of hydropower is tidal energy, which is by using the energy of the tides. Very high cost, and there is limited availability of the sites which you can use, or places where we can use tidal energy, but that again is an option in some of the countries. The third one that we have here is geothermal energy, where we are using the energy which is stored within the earth. So whatever thermal energy is present inside the earth, we are converting that into power. That is what is called as geothermal energy. This picture is from a geothermal power plant which is in Philippines. Philippines is one of the most common, they are one of the highest users of geothermal energy. So not only Philippines, it's also there in Indonesia, in US, in Iceland. Many different countries are using the earth's thermal energy, or the earth's heat, and whatever heat is stored within the earth's crust, and converting it into energy. They are using it for production of electricity. The next one is wind energy. Wind energy is practically zero pollution, because there are turbines which are attached, and when the wind is blowing on these turbines, the turbines move, which helps us to generate electricity. No pollution at all. It is a very clean source of energy. You don't need any fuel, and it helps us to conserve the fossil fuels. Renewable source. Again, here the installation cost may be high, but then virtually after that the energy is free. Again, one more problem with the wind energy is that the wind farms, that is the areas which have a group of turbines, these wind farms need a large area. They depend on fast moving wind, so it may not be suitable for all places. This picture has been taken from Mupandal, which is in Tamil Nadu, which is having one of the biggest wind farms in India. The last one shown over here is energy from biomass. Biomass is basically where we use the organic matter, that is the matter from living organisms. When they die, or as a byproduct of their waste, from what that when we are producing energy, that's what is called as biomass energy. This is a very good alternative source of energy, because here we are using agricultural waste from the farms, cow dung, sewage sludge, all of those products are being used for production of energy. So it's basically energy from the waste. This is a very good source. It's eco-friendly. The raw material is very easily available, especially in the rural areas. And in rural areas, the use of wood comes down because you can provide them with this biomass energy. One of the biomass energy which is shown over here is the generation of biogas. So a biogas is where we put all of these organic matter together. We put in some organisms over there, microorganisms, and in the absence of oxygen they convert the organic matter into gas. That gas is what we call as biogas. The main component of that biogas is methane. So from this biogas we are able to we can use it for kitchen stoves, you can use it for lamps, we can use it for boilers, that is for boiling the water. For all those purposes biogas is really good. Yes, the disadvantage is that you cannot use it for machines, or you cannot use it for automobile engines, because there are a few impurities in it which can corrode the metal, and it is difficult to enhance the efficiency. But otherwise it's a very good option for rural areas where the raw material is so freely available. Now, we also have to know about some liquid fuels which are generated from biomass. So what I told you earlier, that was biogas, where we are generating a gas, but we do have some liquid fuels as well. For example, we have fuels which contain alcohol. They have been obtained from biomass. So I'm talking about alcohol fuels from biomass, like methanol or ethanol or gasohol. So what we do here is we take the some kind of organic matter. Now generally plant crops are used over here, so we take those petro crops or those plant crops, and under high temperature and pressure they they get converted into some petroleum hydrocarbons, which we mix with regular fuel, with regular gasoline, with either 90% of gasoline and 10% of that ethanol what we have generated. This is what we call as gasohol. So it's basically a blend of the regular unleaded gasoline, which is the fuel that is used in the automobiles, and ethanol, which has been obtained by fermentation and distillation of the plant crop. So you could use sugarcane, maize, potatoes, any kind of biomass can be used to generate that ethanol. This is a very common kind of fuel that's used in some countries, like in Brazil, in US, they use it often. So gasohol is a mix of both. Now, there have been experiments which have been done to just use pure alcohol as well, but then that has not been very successful. But at least as a mix, when we use, we are at least reducing the amount of gasoline that is being utilized. Again, here the the problem or the disadvantage is that we instead of using these crops for food, we are using them for fuel. So people who are going hungry could have been fed by using this crop. So there's always a food versus fuel debate that is there. Not only that, you need to alter the engine. It can't be used in a regular car engine. The engine needs to be altered so that it can work on gasohol. The second one is biodiesel, which is again a kind of fuel that you produce from the vegetable oils or from the animal fat or even from algae, which is a very good source, because again algae can be grown in small labs or even in tanks, and then they produce this diesel or methanol based fuel, which is then used in the automobiles. So either it can be used purely or it can be blended and used. Again, one of the problems is that the food versus fuel debate comes in if you are using a plant crop. Of course, if you're using algae, even that problem has been solved. The third fuel is hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very good potential fuel, but the problem is that it has storage issues. So it's very explosive and very, very flammable and volatile, because of which the storage is a problem, transport is a problem. You have to be really careful, otherwise it will blast. That particular automobile or wherever that cell is being used will blast. But otherwise it's a very useful and compact energy source in batteries and in fuel cells, because there's zero emissions, and it's hydrogen is so freely available in the nature that it is virtually very efficient and not toxic at all. The fourth one is compressed natural gas, which is also abbreviated as CNG. This is basically methane in the natural gas form at very high pressure. This has lesser emissions than the conventional fuel. That's why it's considered as a liquid fuel, which is better than the regular fossil fuels. It's cheaper, but of course it's non-renewable. Let me tell you that it's a non-renewable source, and you have to modify the cylinders, you have to modify the engines for usage of CNG. But even then, amongst the currently available fossil fuels, this is the best choice. So this was a quick video on the chapter energy. Hope it was useful to all of you, and I'll meet you all in the next video as well, where we'll talk about the last chapter, that is chapter 10. Thank you.